In the heart of a quiet, forgotten town stood a once grand hotel, the Rosewood Inn. Built in the late 1800s, it had seen its glory days fade as decades passed. Overgrown, ivy clung to its weathered brick exterior, and the whispers of the past echoed in its vacant halls. The Rosewood had been abandoned for years, until a young couple, David and Emma Turner, purchased the dilapidated building with a dream of restoring it to its former elegance. Their vision was ambitious. They imagined the Rosewood as a boutique hotel filled with antique charm and modern comforts. They hired a crew of workers, and renovations began in earnest. Dust flew, walls were torn down, and the hotel's former beauty slowly emerged. One afternoon, a worker named Tom was tearing down a section of a wall in what appeared to be a dead-end hallway. He struck something hard. It wasn't the expected wooden beam, but rather a sealed door, one not listed on any of the blueprints. It was old, with rusted hinges and thick, heavy wood. Curious, Tom called over David. Weird, David muttered, running his fingers over the door. This wasn't in any of the original designs we reviewed. Well, Tom said, it looks like it hasn't been touched in a century. Should we see what's behind it? David hesitated. There was something unsettling about the door, but practicality won over superstition. Yeah, go ahead, he said. Let's see what we're dealing with. It took several hard pushes to pry the door open. When it finally creaked and groaned ajar, a foul stench wafted out, musty and damp, like something long decayed. Inside was a small, dimly lit room, untouched for what seemed like 100 years. The air was thick and oppressive. A single antique bed sat in the corner, its once white linens yellowed with age. There was a vanity with a cracked mirror, a rusted oil lamp, and a small, worn diary on the nightstand. Emma, who had joined them by now, was immediately captivated by the diary. Look at this, she said, picking it up carefully, blowing away the dust that had gathered on the cover. She opened it, and the brittle pages revealed the neat, cursive handwriting of a woman named Abigail. As Emma began to read aloud, the room seemed to grow colder. Abigail had been a young woman who worked at the Rosewood in the late 1800s as a maid. She wrote of her love for a man named Henry, a wealthy guest who promised to marry her. But as the entries progressed, the tone grew darker. Henry had betrayed her, leaving her pregnant and disgraced. Abigail had been hidden away in this very room to avoid scandal, locked in isolation until she gave birth. There was no mention of what happened to the child, only that Abigail's heart had been shattered beyond repair. The final entry read, I will never forgive them for what they've done to me. I shall make them feel my pain, even in death. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. David, she whispered, we shouldn't have opened this room. David, always the skeptic, laughed it off. Come on, Emma. It's just an old story. There's nothing here. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, as they locked up and left the hotel, a storm rolled in. The wind howled, and rain lashed against the old windows, as if nature itself was protesting their intrusion into the forgotten room. That was when the strange occurrences began. It started with small things, lights flickering, cold drafts, and the faint sound of footsteps in empty hallways. But soon it escalated. Guests who had come to stay in the newly renovated rooms complained of nightmares. Visions of a woman crying out for help, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes filled with rage.